How messy has your week been? Mine has included pooey nappies, school reports, family issues. There's always family issues. I witnessed a car accident, and a couple of days later I was caught up in the aftermath of a 5-car accident. And of course, this sermon. Was God's name in my thoughts and on my lips in those messy moments? In your mess, were you seeking him, his wisdom and his forgiveness? It's not unusual for me to lose sight of God in moments of mess, as I rely on myself to manoeuvre and to manipulate my way through. Yes, my way. I suspect that you know what I'm talking about. What a mess Isaac and Rebekah, Esau and Jacob have got themselves into. The beginning of God's new family is about to disintegrate as a result of parental favoritism, sibling rivalry, collusion, deception, disrespect, forgetfulness, and now Esau's murderous intent. All of this seems to entangle and to be suffocating God's promise of blessing. Where is God in this mess? What is God doing? Anything? Where is God in the worldwide mess? And in your messiness? Jacob is on the run. He's heading for Haran, 800 kilometres away. He thinks he knows where he's going, but he's lost because God is not on his radar. The only time that God's name has been on Jacob's list in this account so far is when he lied to his father last week. Pretending to be his brother, he comes and says, "The Lord your God gave me success." Isn't it interesting that it's not the Lord our God, or not the Lord my God, but the Lord your God? He wants the blessing that ultimately only God can give. He wants the land. He wants the family. He wants all the perceived power. He's in love with the notion of the blessing, but he wants it apart from God, apart from the giver. As we've seen previously and in the kids' talk, it was God's intention from before he was born that he would be the carrier of this blessing. Yet by his grasping, he's now exiled from the land and his family, lost and alone. His constant impatient grasping has got him nothing but trouble. Please look with me at verse 11. The sun sets on the first day of his journey, and he has reached a certain place. It just looks like a random place, but this is a certain place. This is a God-ordained place. In the darkness of this night, something monumental is about to happen. He stops and uses a rock for a pillow, which makes us wonder, doesn't it? Which is the hardest, the rock or his head? No, his heart. Then, at this lowest of low points, this point of lostness, God comes to him. God finds him. God reveals himself to him. Verse 12. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth with its top reaching to heaven and the angels of God ascending and descending on it. Verse 13. There, right beside him, stood the Lord, If you've got your Bibles open, you're not reading that, are you? There, right beside him, stood the Lord. Cast your eyes down to the footnote. Where is God at his lowest place? Right beside him. This is a close personal encounter with the living God. This certain place is a touch point between heaven and earth, or as Jacob describes it, the gate of heaven. He doesn't realise it yet, but this is a gateway to a new life. This is an epic Eden experience. God is right there by his side, like he was with Adam and Eve in the garden. This is how it is meant to be. This is a fearful and awesome place. And God comes to this deceitful grasper, this liar and thief, this blasphemous self-seeker. God comes not to reprimand, not to punish, not to destroy. Rather, he comes with purposeful words of promise and blessing. Yet again, God reveals himself as faithful and true. He is the God who is faithful to the unfaithful. He is the God who is ever near despite being transcendent. He is the paradoxical God. He is near even in Jacob's mess of sin and lostness, and ours as well. God reveals himself, his person, his character, to this scoundrel. Has God revealed himself to you? The answer is yes. But it's possible that you're unaware of it. Possibly you haven't had a dream like Jacob. Possibly you've been so focused on your circumstances, your mess, and you living your way, that you haven't seen God's light in your darkness. Has God revealed himself to you? The answer is yes. At that touch point between heaven and earth, the gate of heaven named Jesus. Again, from the kids' talk, when we look at Jesus' encounter with Nathanael, in John 1:51, Jesus identifies himself as the stairway to heaven. Jesus says, "Very truly, I tell you, you will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." God has revealed himself to us. He came to us in our grasping and in our lostness. Jesus, the incarnate Son of God, the Son of Man, came and stood right beside us in the messy depravity of our humanity. The cross and the empty tomb have become the gate to heaven. The only gate to heaven. But it's still open today. It's open to you today. Jesus is offering you new life, full life, as a free gift. If you haven't yet embraced the giver and accepted the gift open-handedly, please don't delay. Jesus revealed the faithfulness of God to the unfaithful. More than that, he was condemned to death so that trusting him, we might be raised to new life. As it says in John 3:17, "For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him." If you embrace Jesus, your biggest fears can be dealt with. God reveals himself to Jacob. Then God restates his promises to Jacob's grandfather and father and gives them to him with purposeful promise. Please look with me at verses 13 and 14. I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust on the earth and will spread out to the west, to the east, to the north, to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. This is God's plan. This is God's solid purpose, which God will fulfill regardless of this or any other mess. Land, descendants, and blessing are promised to this lost wanderer who was found in lonely darkness and sin. This is pure grace. To shed greater light, God promises more in verse 15. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. God is promising nothing less than himself. He will deliver regardless of the magnitude and the messiness of sin and death. The true and living God promises, I am with you. I will not leave you. God promises his presence. And this presence is not confined to Bethel or this place. As Paul says to the Athenians in Acts 17, in him we live and move and have our being. The transcendent God has not just come near, his promise is to stay near. God promises his presence. However, unless you have embraced God's gift by embracing Jesus, sadly, you're probably unaware of his presence. God promises his presence. He also promises his protection. I will watch over you wherever you go. Yet he will not sweep away the messiness just to make Jacob's life or our lives more comfortable. For he wants us to learn. He wants us to learn true faithfulness and true love. He wants us to learn more about his faithfulness and his love. And we'll see next week and the next few weeks that even darker and messier times await Jacob. God will not take the mess away, for there are lessons to be learned as we are shaped to be more like Jesus. He has, however, taken upon himself in Jesus the punishment for all the sin that is the root cause of our mess, to which all humanity have contributed, even us. The ultimate protection that God gives, this ultimate protection, freely flows to all who recognize that Jesus is the way, the truth, the life, the gate to heaven, the stairway to heaven. God has promised himself in his presence and in his protection. And in promising Jacob these, he's also promising provision for the journey. You see, Jacob and us need to recognize that if God's presence and protection are ours each day, We have all that we need to face each day, and the next day, and every next day, and the final day when sin and death are destroyed forever. God reveals himself. God promises himself. And Jacob and we respond. Jacob's response is initially this. He was afraid and said, "How awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven." This holy fear and wonder lead to worship. He sets up a monument to help him remember, and so that others will know that this is a sacred place. And then he makes a vow. Verses 20 to 22. "If God will be with me and will watch over me on this journey I am taking, and give me food to eat and clothes to wear, so that I return safely to my father's household, then the Lord will be my God. And this stone that I have set up as a pillar will be the house, God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give you a tenth." What do you think of this vow? Remembering it's in response to God's gracious, unconditional revealing of himself in his promises. If you prove yourself trustworthy, if you prove yourself true to your word, if you prove yourself to be a generous provider, then you will be my God. Sounds a bit iffy, doesn't it? Prove yourself, God, then I'm all in. Well, I'll give you a tenth. Sounds like he's putting God to the test. For us post-first century mess dwellers, God has revealed himself and shown himself to be faithful and trustworthy and a generous provider through Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. Yet if you're even a little like me, you'll have times when you put God to the test. Times when I doubt his generous provision. I want more. Times when I ignore his presence. I'm happier with my own company. Failing to be patient and to trust his protection, I try to protect myself. Overlooking his unshakable promises. Have you put God to the test lately? Many of us, like Jacob, have entered the gate to heaven. Jacob didn't realise how long or messy the journey home would be, and he would revert to what came naturally to him, grasping, lying and deceiving. And moreover, he's going to be lied to and deceived on the way. Yet even in this messier mess, God was present, God was protecting, God was providing. He is truly the God of grace. If you're not yet a follower of Jesus, how will you navigate your way through this increasingly messy world? What will you do when you're unable to protect yourself from depravity? What will you do to provide for yourself a standing before God that will last? Perhaps you are unaware that God is in this place and he wants to embrace you and give you his promises and give you himself. If that is you, please chat with Daryl or I before you go. For those of us who have entered the narrow gate and who are journeying through the mess to our true home, can I please ask you to take some time daily to remember that Jesus is Emmanuel, God with us. Can I ask you to sit quietly in his presence, reflecting upon the protection that he has ensured through his cross and resurrection? And can you take that little bit of time to be thankful that he provides himself to satisfy our daily needs? Each day he's calling us towards growth in faith, hope and love. In the mess, he's calling us towards faith, hope and love. Why is that? Because often faith, hope and love are best expressed in the mess. And when we gather here in his presence together, surely we should be reminding ourselves and each other of these great truths. Rather than only reciting messiness stories, let's share God's unbreakable promises of presence, protection and provision to counter the mess, to guide us through the mess. To conclude, I invite you to pray with me. I'm going to ask you to keep your eyes open, and you can either pray silently or if you want to pray aloud, do so. I'm going to pray these words that are on the screen. Meet me, O Christ, in the stillness of this moment. Move me, O Spirit, to quieten my heart. Mend me, O Father, from yesterday's harms.